Appreciate you taking the time and doing this interview for Conscious Nashville. We appreciate it, and I'd like everybody that is watching to meet you. And this is Miles Adcox.
It is.
And I know you're doing a lot of things around town and in the public's eye, if you will. And you are definitely at cause and have a purpose. And I would like for our viewers to get a little bit of background on who Miles is, and then I'd like to talk about one of your projects called Blind Kindness. So, Miles, who are you?
Good question. I am somebody who about 10 years ago, or actually a little further back, that was kind of cruising through my professional life and having a lot of success in various areas, but I really felt disconnected from what I was doing. And I didn't really know what that was about, but I knew it was impacting me and my relationships and my personal life, which I didn't have much of one, because all I was doing was working. So I was really out of balance at that point, and I took a turn at that time and did some of my own soul searching, did some of my own work, which has taken me a lot of cool places since then. But what it did is it changed everything about me, and it changed who I am, and it also changed what I do. It led me into a kind of, I've spent the last 10 years in the behavioral health field and done various things, from run a treatment center for a few years to lately what I do most of the time is I own and run a program called Onsite, and we work with people. It's a pretty diverse offering, but I kind of represent and employ about 45 to 50 of some of the most skilled clinicians, counselors, and therapists all over the country. And I kind of represent them in the way that a music manager would represent an artist. I feel like I represent talent, and I go out and I get these people who are really successful with what they do. They have a private practice, or they speak, or they write. And then I have a retreat center just outside of Nashville, 50 beds on it's beautiful. It's on about 80 acres. And I run a whole series, about 42 weeks out of the year. I'm running short-term therapeutic personal growth workshops for a whole variety of different issues, or for people that don't even have issues but want more depth in their heart. And so I work with individuals, couples, and families. I bring them all in together as a unit or individually. And we just have a diverse offering. It's everything from living centered to creating more intimacy in your relationship to what I like to say to people, to summarize it, is what is it for? Is it something you go to therapy for? Is it something and yes and yes. For a lot of people, it's if you hit a point in your life where you feel stuck in any area, and most people can relate to that. Even those of us who've done a lot of self-reflecting or personal work, we still know what stuck places feel like.
Right.
And it's a great process for people to come, get out of their environment, and do some intensive work to to get unstuck. And it's a great alternative to going. People compared it to like a year's worth of therapy. If you went once a week for a year, you can we do it hour by hour, about that many in 4 or 5 days. So
right.
That's what I'm spending most of my time doing now. And I also travel around the country and speak about it. I just spoke this morning to a group of practitioners down in Brentwood. And I just got back last week from taping the show on the doctors, and done Dr. Phil a few times. I work with the Dr. Phil show quite a bit with his families. And so it's just been really fun. It's been a great ride. I mean,
so what were you doing? Because you said that this inner reflection took you on this new path. So prior to this, what was your previous life?
I was I got out of graduate school and went to work in the sports industry, and I kind of hit that place where I did a little bit of broadcasting right out of the gate, and I had to make a decision at that point. Do I go broadcasting, or I go towards the administrative or business side of the sports business? I was pulled more towards the administrative side, which is the kind of the business side of sports, versus the creative broadcasting side. And for me at that time in my life, that felt important. You could definitely make way more money doing going and selling corporate sponsorships and entertaining clients than you could doing sideline analysis at an event. But I really had a passion for doing that, and that was one of the first times in my life I remember going against my gut and with my head, and it was like, okay, well, must be the route to go because there's more opportunity, more money, and that's what
it was logical. Makes sense, right?
There you go. Yeah, and when I did that, that's when I started having this internal conflict, and it caught up with me in various areas of my life, professionally first, but I always was able to contain that. Like I kept the professional container going good, and I wore that hat really well, but I really never knew who I was personally. And ultimately, it caught up with me. I ended up becoming pretty depressed around that piece, and I just always felt the disconnect, and I got tired of being who various groups of people needed me to be in order to accept me. Got really good at that, and I got really tired of it.
Right. I have a favorite question for people sometimes when they talk about, being everything to everyone. It's like if you showed up at a party and absolutely everybody who knew you, who you worked with, who you partied with, who everybody knew you show up in that room, who would you be when you walked in? And it's amazing how people, that would be a terrifying experience. And one question I found interesting too, because I've sort of thought that this has always been a true connection, and I found it to be true. And so with your expertise, I'm curious to know your take on it. Do you find that people who go through like what you've gone through, and they have that disconnect, wherever it may be, but they don't end up paying attention to it, and they ignore it, and they ignore it, and they ignore it, do you find that they end up dealing with all ailments and injuries and illnesses to really force them to get back to that place where maybe they will connect?
That's a tough one, because I've had a lot of people ask me that before. They're like, do you think this adverse struggle in life has been put in front of them in order for them to reconnect with who they really are? Do I think as a side benefit to struggle, it happens a lot, because I deal with people in struggle a lot, and I do a lot of coaching with, for instance, the entertainment community and other people that they go from one place and they catapult to another place overnight without even really knowing who am I inside before that happens. And then everything kind of hits the fan because they don't know how to deal with it. And that's when the struggle happens. And I think it's a nice, but I don't know. I think there's something bigger than us that's a mystery to me on whether people get illness or struggle or experience trauma as a way to reconnect themselves. Good question. What do you think?
Well, the thing I've found in working with people is that what appears to be going on to them when we start to sift through where it's really coming from, because I work on this idea that we build these foundations on lies that we make up when we're kids to survive, basically, and without getting into all of that, and those lies become kind of their own self-fulfilling prophecies, and a lot of times where that hurt or that injury is a lot of those proponents of what they're dealing with. And sometimes that does go all the way to a very toxic reality, to where they do get quite ill and quite sick, and it's sort of like it brings them back home again in a way.
Now, I do agree with that, because we work with people that struggle connecting relationally, which you can call that codependent, where they're really dependent on other people's approval, or there's a lot of different things you can call it. Most all pathology underneath codependency, or if you get into addictions or process addictions, other ways that people find to medicate pain or feelings, we find is rooted in trauma, emotional trauma. And trauma being defined as as simple as anything other than nurturing, which I love that definition of it, because it kind of takes it out of what we thought was this complex PTSD in order to experience it, and it's not the case. And I do believe that people get imprinted in how and what they experience, and they kind of attach to a story. That storyline becomes who they are, and everything gets reacted to out of that. And I have seen people that create blocks, because ultimately you reach a point and it doesn't work. And I've seen it create blocks that have been the byproduct of a block feeling is stress, a lot of stress, and it gets, and that's a word everybody mainstream can connect to. But I've seen illnesses. There's a lot of stress-related illnesses, and so you're right. I think you're right about that.